Good morning and namaste to all of you. And we always start these scriptural studies with some mantras. For this class, I have decided just one or two mantras. And I'll give you the meaning of that today also. The first mantra we're going to say, Sarvo Ipnushido Gava Dogada Gopal Nandana Partha Vatsa Sudhir Bhogata Dugdam Gita Amritam Mahat. So all the Upanishads are the cows. The son of the cowherd, that is Lord Krishna, is the milkman. Parth, that is another name for Arjuna, is the calf. Men of purified intellect are the enjoyers, and the supreme nectar of the Gita is the milk. So in other words, this Gita is also Upanishad. Last week I was telling you, in the Vedas, there are 4 Vedas, and every Ved has Upanishads towards the end. And altogether, we have 108 Upanishads. And Bhagavad Gita is on top of those 108 Upanishads. If you have a Gita book, towards the end of each chapter, you will find that. See, this was the style, writing the title of the chapter towards the end. If you look at towards the end of the first chapter, it says, Om Tat Sat Iti Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishad Su Brahma Vidyayam Yog Shastre Shri Krishna Arjun Samvade Arjun Vishada Yogo Nam Prathamo Adhyaya. So that means the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is the Upanishad. And Upanishad means a dialogue between a guru and a disciple. And over here, who's the guru? Lord Krishna. Who's the disciple? Arjuna. Lord Krishna uses many names for Arjuna in this scripture. And Arjuna also calls Lord Krishna by many different names. That's a close relationship between a guru and a disciple. They say this is the closest relationship in human beings. So it's a Brahma Vidya and it's a Yoga Shastra also. Brahma Vidya, that is a scriptural studies. Yoga Shastra means it also gives us a technique to reach that perfection also. Okay, so this is one of the mantra. Another mantra which you are all familiar with, the Gayatri mantra. Because in the Gayatri mantra, we are praying to God for a higher intellect so that we can understand it all and we can live a life intelligently. Om Bhur Swaha Tat Savitra Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Om Shanti 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 Om. We always say Shanti 3 times. We need peace at the level of our body. We are praying to God. And we need a peace at a mental level. And we need a peace at the intellectual level also. Okay? In order to live a fruitful life. So let's look at first chapter. First of all, the name is Vishada Yog. Vishada Yog. Every chapter ends with this yoga. That's why I said this is a yoga shastra. Yoga shastra. What does Vishad mean? Vishad means despair, a grief. You all know that this Bhagavad Gita is part of a big epic, which is called Mahabharata. And this whole dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna happened in the middle of that war. When Arjuna looked at the armies, both sides, even though he was a great warrior, the best of his time, with all the divine powers he had, because he was a son of Devraj Indra. So Devraj Indra himself gave him a lot of powers too, powerful weapons, but still he got into that state of mind, extremely confused, almost into the state of depression. So in the middle of the war zone, this great philosophy is being imparted to us. And last time I was telling you, our own life is like that too. lot of confusion sometimes, lot of conflicts. Sometimes we are very sad. We cannot make the decisions. So the knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita clarifies for us. So going back to the first chapter, there are 47 verses. See, the whole Bhagavad Gita is in verses, which are called shlokas. So each chapter has different number of verses. The first chapter has 47 verses. And if you divide these 47 verses, the first 20 verses is a description of the war. What is really happening there? The names of the warriors, the names of their weapons also, the names of their the conches and the bugles and all kinds of musical instruments also. So it's like a description is so clear that you almost feel like you are standing there with those warriors. So first 20 verses. The second part of this first chapter is where Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna to bring the chariot in the middle of the war zone, like in the middle of the two armies, because he wants to see who has come over here to fight. And that is verse number 21 to 26. And the third section of this chapter is from verses 27 to 46, where Arjuna is lamenting after looking at who's standing there. And he says, this war should not be waged. And the closing verse of this chapter is spoken by Sanjay, because he is describing what happened to Arjuna. After lamenting, he has sat down, he put his weapon on the side and he says, I'm not going to fight. So it's like an emotional reaction of Arjuna in this chapter. So this is the picture of this chapter. Okay, so because sometimes what happens when you open this book and you start reading all those names, the names you can't even pronounce, you say it's not for me. So that's the reason I just broke it down into these three sections. And first section is just that. In fact, Bhagavad Gita starts where Dhritarashtra, the blind king, is sitting in Hastinapur, in his capital. He cannot see, but he is the king. And he asked his charioteer, Sanjay. That is the name of the charioteer. Because Sanjay was given this power where he could see also far away and he could hear also from far away. This is a yogic power. Yogic textbooks, they talk about these powers. The yogis have these powers. So he is explaining, narrating what is really happening all the way over there, miles away. And Dhritarashtra, the blind king, he's asking his charioteer, tell me what is happening there. So basically, this is a conversation between that blind king Dhritarashtra and his charioteer. Then in the middle of that conversation is a conversation between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. But before that, in the first section of the first chapter, he describes that Duryodhana, his eldest son, who has extreme negative tendencies, Duryodhana. He goes to his teacher, Dronacharya. So this is the first part. And he's telling him, look at these Pandavas. Look at their army. Look at how much power they have. We got to be careful. When the grandfather, Bhishma Pitama, hears it, to encourage Duryodhana, he blows his bugle. And blowing the bugle means starting the war. And that's where everybody started blowing their instruments, and the Pandavas did too. So that is the very first part. So all the kind names, and how many people were there? This was not a small war, even though it looks like a family feud. 100 cousins on one side and 5 cousins on the other side, and dispute was over the kingdom. But no, Dronacharya taught all these Kauravas and Pandavas. And the Kauravas, they were ruling the kingdom for so many years, while the Pandavas were in exile. So they had a lot of friends. Anybody in power has a lot of allies. So altogether, there were 18 Akshoni army. Just let me tell you what Akshoni really means. Akshoni means there were elephants also. 21,870 elephants. So that means not just on the elephants, but they were the person who took care of the elephant too. So 2 people. Then there were chariots, 21,870 chariots. So that means the person who was riding the chariot, and there's a charioteer, and there was a person who was taking care of the horses also. And then there were soldiers on the horses, 65,610. And then there were foot soldiers also, 109,350. So altogether, this is one Akshoni. That is a technical term. Altogether, there were 18 Akshoni. So it was a super great war, if you look at it. The number of the people on earth at that time, more than 5,000 years ago. Compared to that, how many people were in that war? Out of that 18, 11 Akshoni was Kauravas. And 7 Akshoni was Pandavas. So this is the ratio. Even though Pandavas, they were so pure, they were divine beings, but not too many people with them, compared to the people who were with Duryodhana. Okay, he is the king. Or the king's son who is going to be the king. So you see that people like to take the side of the powerful people, even if they are bad people. This 11 and 7, 18 number is very significant here. Mahabharata, the whole epic, has 18 chapters. And those chapters are called Parva. Bhagavad Gita itself is divided into 18 chapters. And Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata. And the whole war also lasted 18 days. So this 18 number must have some kind of a special significance in this war. On one hand, the Kauravas, their army was being led by the grandfather, Bhishma Pitama. And he had the death in his hand. That means he could not die unless he wanted to die. On the other hand, Pandavas, they were being led by Draupadi's brother, Drishtadyumna, and he was very powerful too. So this is the picture over here. The chariots, the horses, the elephants, the foot soldiers, all kinds of mighty soldiers over there and the leaders over there. And of course, Arjuna gets little, not just a little, a lot disturbed by looking at it, because these are his cousins, his teachers, his grandsons also, grandfather also. So all these people were there. One thing I want to make sure you understand, since it's called a Yoga Shastra, Dharma Shastra we talked about last time, Yoga Shastra, because you will see throughout Bhagavad Gita the techniques to improve yourself. This word yoga has been used in this scripture almost 150 places. For multiple purposes, because these days we think yoga really means physical exercises. It's not. We got to look at the yoga word properly. The union of the individual soul with the God is called yoga. And that is the ultimate goal of a human being. We came from God and we got to go back. But in order to go back, we got to purify ourselves. That's why in this great scripture, Lord Krishna is telling us how to purify yourself. And what do we need to purify? Soul doesn't need any purification. It's always pure. What do we purify? Our actions, our thoughts, our intellect, our ego, our behavior, eating habits, talking habits, relationships. We need to have purification there if you want to attain the goal. And that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. The science of accomplishing that union is also called yoga. The state of perfection achieved through the process is also called yoga. In chapter 6, verse 18, he will tell us that. The state of freedom from suffering is referred to as yoga. That means when there is no suffering, because our state of being is always blissful. So when there's no suffering, it's a yoga. Since perfection is accompanied by evenness of mind, this kind of equanimity is called yoga. Yoga samatvam uchyate. One who is in the state of yoga performs all activities perfectly in a spirit of devotion to God. That's why Lord Krishna in chapter 2 we'll see, he says the dexterity at work is it yoga also. So remember, this is a yogic scripture where we learn how to purify ourselves. With all this information, I want you to look at the reasons Arjuna gives in the middle of this chapter to Lord Krishna. At this point, Lord Krishna is just, he knows that he's special. He knows he's his friend. He knows he's his cousin. He doesn't know his God. That's why Arjuna keeps on giving these arguments to him. And we'll see that in this chapter, Lord Krishna hardly says anything. Only half a sentence he says. Because when Arjuna says, bring my chariot in the middle of the two armies, Lord Krishna says, here it is. You are in the middle of the two armies. That's all he says. So Arjuna keeps on talking, keeps on talking. Let me give you his arguments. He says, first of all, he says, my mouth is dry. My body is shaking by looking at these great people standing on both sides. And that's what happens when we see something so big, so powerful. It happens to us. Reaction on our body. And then he says, my skin is burning. My Gandiv is falling out of my hands. Gandiv is the name of his bow. Powerful bow he had. Because they fought with the bow and arrows, with the maces. They didn't have the guns at that time. But they had powerful bows. Then he says, I do not want any kingdom or pleasure. What is the purpose of pleasure when all these relatives are standing to fight and ready to die? Very logical argument he's making. Because we enjoy our life, we enjoy our opulence when we are with our friends and family. This is if all then die, what good is that pleasure? I don't want this kingdom. I want to point out while he is making these arguments, Lord Krishna is just looking at him, listening and smiling. Not smiling at him, but that smile really means he's sure of himself. He knows where Arjuna is coming from. That is a great personality, the confidence. Another thing he's showing, Arjuna is talking, Lord Krishna is just listening. That's another thing we got to learn from this chapter. Be a good listener. We want to talk. But in listening, we really understand what is coming to us from the other side. Listening. Then Arjuna says, I do not want to kill my relatives, cousins, uncles, grandsons, teachers, etc. Then there are altogether 11 arguments he is making, or 11 reasons he is giving Lord Krishna that we should run away from here. It's not worth it. Then he says, even for the 3 worlds, I do not want to kill them. 3 worlds means this earth, the sky, the heavens, whatever 3 worlds are, he says, I really don't want to kill my relatives. The earthly kingdom, he says, nothing compared to the 3 worlds. Then he says, we won't be happy after killing even these bad people. So he utters this truth that these are bad people, because we know that if we have read Mahabharata, how many negative tendencies these Kauravas had, how many times they tried to kill Pandavas, poison them, drown them, try to burn them. They didn't want to even give even 5 villages to them or 5 houses to them, even though the kingdom was rightfully there. Then he says, we should think of some other ways of dealing with this. Otherwise, there will be a destruction of the families in the society. We should turn away from this sin. Sure, there's a destruction after war. And that's exactly what happened also. After this great war, all the development was gone. The great missiles which they had, it was all gone with that war. All the great men, they died with that war. So whatever he is saying is true. These arguments are not wrong. But the place to make the arguments is wrong. Right in the middle of the war, when everybody is ready, that's not the time we do this. With the destruction of the families, the ancient religious rights of that family perish. On the destruction of spirituality, lawlessness indeed overcomes the whole family. If the head of the family is gone, because men, they were bringing food home. If they are gone, what will the women do? What will happen to the children? Lawlessness. Then another argument he makes, by the prevalence of lawlessness, the women of the family become corrupt. They'll have to feed the children. Then descendants go downward. So those are the kind of offsprings will be born when there's no spirituality. When in the family there is a purity, then the pure souls come. This is the argument he's trying to make over here. This takes people towards a hell. Hell means downward. And then even if Kauravas kill me in this battlefield unarmed, that is better for me. And that's when he puts his bow and arrow down and he sits down. Normally, he was standing up. And let me tell you, Arjuna waged many, many wars before this time. Many, many wars. This was not the first time. And he was so strong, so powerful, so courageous. But this time, he became weak. First of all, the people who were standing against him, they were his own, especially his teacher, who loved him immensely. Arjuna was his favorite, and teacher name was Dronacharya. And the Bhishma Pitama also, he grew up in his lap. And he had to wage the war, so it became personal. Even though this war was between dharam and adharam, righteousness and unrighteousness, he forgot at this point. When we get attached, when we are too much into the middle of it, we forget the bigger picture. And he forgot the bigger picture. So remember, when you go back to this chapter, just read it in these 3 sections. Do not get lost into the words. Remember the scene. It is a big war. And why it's happening to Arjuna. And another thing, do not get lost into the names also, the names which are being used. That just only shows that how close the relationship was. And we will definitely, or we might have the list of the different names used by both Lord Krishna and Arjuna for each other on our website. Okay, you can go back and look at it. So the first section, verse 1 to 20, description about that war zone, the names of the warriors, okay, and how it starts. And it starts with the Kauravas, not by Pandavas, because the head of the Kauravas, Bhishma Pitama, is the one who blew the conch first. So historically, the Kauravas were aggressors, not the Pandavas. And the second part, verse 21 to 26, Arjuna is observing the armies on the battle. And the last part, 27 to 46, Arjuna laments and gives all these reasons to Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna keeps on listening to him attentively, and he will give the answer in the next chapter, and we'll see how beautifully he tries to answer Arjuna, almost like a rebuttal of these arguments and these lamentations. And the last verse on the first chapter is Sanjay again speaking and telling the blind king that Arjuna has sat down. Okay. So if anybody has any question about anything, we can talk about it at this point, because I have just, without going into too much detail, gave you the description of the first chapter. Because the reason I wanted to do it this way, because a lot of people, I hear from them that they read the first chapter or they go through the first chapter, they get so confused and they say, hey, it's not for me. The philosophy is not given in the first chapter. The Gita philosophy starts with the second chapter. Okay. And I would like you to just write down the names of these chapters also. But the first chapter name is Vishada Yog. Because this title itself tells us all about the chapter, Vishada Yog. And by the end of Bhagavad Gita, you will have all these 18 names and the meanings of these 18 names understood, well understood. Okay. So any question, comment? Nobody? Okay.
Guruji, how do you spell the first chapter?
Okay, good. Vishad, V-I-S-H-A-A-D. That's how I will do it, because I know English translators, they have translated the names, like the book which I have in front of me. What does he say? He says Arjuna's dilemma. Yeah, that is true too, dilemma. But dilemma when he really becomes dejected, when he becomes, he's overcome with the fear also and the grief also. That is the dilemma he is in. Okay, but the Sanskrit name is Vishada Yog. Another thing I want to point out to you, the Arjuna's condition over here, it's almost like a hitting the bottom. When you hit the bottom, as they say, only then you can rise up. Like, this world is no good. I would rather have the purity in my life. I would rather have the peacefulness in my life, not the things, not the materialism. That's what's happening to Arjuna. So Arjun's condition is the first step towards the yoga sadhana. It's very important. Often we see something happens in a person's life, and it's the right time, if the right person is with us, can guide us towards the right direction. Otherwise, we are just living in this world. We think that, hey, enjoy, like there's no tomorrow. But when something like this happens, we really move towards the perfection. So Vishad should be taken over here. So why Vishada Yog? Because Vishad is needed to make a change in your life. And this is exactly what happened to Arjuna. Okay? So, but the company has to be right. And he was in the right company. And you will see that he accepted him as his guru. He says, you are my guru. I cannot decide what to do. I am so confused. Please do tell me, what should I do? And we'll see that Lord Krishna will tell him what to do, but Arjuna will again ask questions. He's not ready to fight yet. But towards the end of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, okay, I have told you what I needed to tell you, now do as you wish. And what does Arjuna say? I will do as you say. Because Lord Krishna is going to teach him how to wage this war. How to wage it, because he says it's sinful. But Guru tells us how to do these duties so that you do not occur any sin. That's what we'll learn. Doing the duties so that there's no impressions. Sins are nothing but impressions put on our deeper mind. Sins are, in a yogic philosophy or the Vedic philosophy, there's no as such term as sin. These are just the obstacles on the path of purity. We are all moving towards the purity. Purity means the divinity. We are all moving towards it, but we just keep on creating the obstacles. So how to remove the obstacles? That's what a yogi guru teaches us. But are we ready to accept a guru? Are we ready to follow the advice of a guru? Arjuna was. And that's what we see in this great scripture, Bhagavad Gita. Okay? So what I would like you to do this week, go back to this chapter, because maybe you did not get a chance to look at this chapter. Look at this chapter again and ask. Next week, you can ask the question too. That's okay. So next week, if you want to ask about the second chapter or the first chapter, that's fine too. But if you have any question right now, that's fine too. Okay? So if nobody has a question, Jyoti, you can stop the recording. And I will do the Shanti mantra first. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much, Bhakta.